Beep beep.
Hello, and welcome to the Parent Trip Postpartum in a Pandemic panel. My name is Daniele Strawmyre, and I'm the owner of Ready, Set, Grow and a perinatal movement specialist. And I'm really excited to host today, and I'm really grateful to Olivia and Sarah for this opportunity and for putting together another wonderful informational event. We're going to watch a short video of a collection of parents speaking about their experience of being postpartum in a pandemic. And then after that, we will meet our panelists and get started. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I gave birth on October 19th of 2020.
I'm Nicole Pruitt. I gave birth to my daughter on February 24th, 2020, 27 days before Oregon went into lockdown.
Hi, I'm Kelsey, and I live in Portland, and I just had a baby last July.
My name is Danielle McCary, and I had a 3-week-old and a 2-year-old. We went to lockdown.
My name is Christina Troutman, and I am 4 months postpartum.
My name's Michelle, and I'm 36 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I just had my second baby, Dorian, who's right here on my chest.
So, postpartum in a pandemic has been hard for pretty much all the reasons you can think about.
I believe the hardest part of this pandemic has been the sense of isolation.
That feeling of isolation was magnified, I think, even more being in a pandemic.
We haven't been able to share Peter with any of our family and friends in the ways we had hoped.
Not very many people have met our daughter, up close, which has been weird and different and strange, but that's just kind of the way things are right now.
Definitely been a lot more feelings of isolation.
We haven't been able to have the family and friend support that we anticipated, and not being able to have that or just do the traditional things that we do yearly with family and friends, and have our daughter go to them.
Not being able to share my baby with my community, with my people.
The lack of community that we were able to develop.
Normally you would have friends and family come over to support you in terms of, emotionally, but then also bringing food and just being able to maybe do the dishes for you or hold your baby for a little bit.
No one really just dropped by to help besides my mom.
Not being able to build connections with family who's distant, with friends who are distant. But I think the biggest thing for me has been not being able to really build a village.
While it was beyond difficult not to be able to share our sweet babe or welcome help into our home, it was absolutely incredible to snuggle him all to ourselves.
I'm fortunately able to work from home, and so when I normally would have to send my baby back to daycare when I begin working full-time, I'm now able to have him here because I'm home all the time, and I can continue nursing and keep my newborn close to me, at least for a while longer.
And because we weren't really having a lot of visitors, we weren't concerned about the baby getting sick or that sort of thing too. So that was kind of a nice thing.
I've learned a lot this year with parenting. I think times of stress and uncertainty really are very revealing of things. And I think automatically you think of weaknesses. And there's definitely things with my parenting that I noticed were weaknesses and things that I needed to grow in and work on. But there was also a lot of good things that came out of this, strengths that I didn't know I had. And I learned that I could handle a lot more than I thought I could initially.
Wow, that almost made me cry a little bit. Right? I mentioned that I'm a perinatal movement specialist. I own Ready, Set, Grow, and we do have classes and groups and stuff online. But I should mention that I am also just over 3 months postpartum. myself. So I did have a baby in a pandemic. It was my third. So the biggest challenge for me, I think, has been navigating distance learning and homeschooling and a baby. It's been really intense. But let's get to the panelists. I'm super excited to talk to all of you and hear what you have to say and how you've been supporting families, because I'm sure it's been really appreciated and it's really needed, right? So let's start with Amy Galaviz. Galaviz. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go just right across the way I see everyone. So Amy Galaviz, perinatal therapist. Can you tell a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a registered LPC intern with the state of Oregon and a mental health counseling associate for the state of Washington. And I specialize in maternal mental health and perinatal loss, so helping to support mothers throughout pregnancy, through the postpartum period, and even other life stages of being a mom, because what's difficult changes throughout the season of motherhood. So I basically help, especially now, to help support mothers who are feeling isolated. They may be working through grief and loss. They may be suffering from perinatal mood or anxiety disorders. And then just feeling not supported. They're kind of cut off right now and isolated. So kind of just caring for mothers and holding space for whatever they're struggling with at the time.
Wonderful. I think mental health support is really important all the time, but really during that transition. Wonderful. Thank you. Let's, Barb, can you tell us about yourself and how you support families through postpartum?
Yeah, my name is Barb Buckner Suárez. I'm a health educator. I've been honored to work with thousands and thousands of couples over my 20 plus years working in this field. I do childbirth prep classes. I do early pregnancy classes. I do a whole bunch of support in pregnancy and birth. But I think I've been called on today to actually represent what I do on the other side. And I suppose Becoming Us classes, which are what I'd like to call baby-proofing the couple relationship, is a really important way that I support folks. And also doing some couples coaching. I think it's been really interesting to prepare people for this time. The classes and the stressors of being pregnant and having a baby are really always high. But right now, add in a global pandemic, an election year, civil unrest, whatever else you want to put into the pot, it's been even more stressful. And so I think that really preparing people for what to expect and then really encouraging them to plan for their postpartum time. I'm not a huge fan of birth plans, but I'm a massive fan of the postpartum plan.
Agreed. And I think paying attention to the couple relationship is something that's often neglected. So I feel like I should have done some Becoming Us classes before.
I have them for folks who have kids that are pretty grown, actually. So it's all the way through.
Sejal, can you tell us about yourself and how you support families through postpartum also?
Hi, I'm Sejal, and I am a postpartum doula, and I'm also a lactation consultant. And I like to say that I support families on the other side by doing a little more hands-on help. You guys take care of the brain, and I take care of the boobs. And I also take care of, when I'm a doula, I'm working with families and helping them postpartum. I don't do birth doula work right now, but postpartum is where my passion is. So I will go into families' homes and help them welcome their baby and settle in to their homes. I make meals for them. Basically, my job is to make life easier by getting, things that need to be done around the house so that they can snuggle with their babies. So I do sleep, snuggles, and sustenance. So sustenance meaning in making meals, snacks, smoothies, whatever the parents desire, so that they don't have to, make food for themselves. And then I also help them sort out the laundry, because laundry is always piled up in everybody's homes, pandemic or not. And I try to bring some level of sanity. That's what I do.
I have to interject a fun little anecdote here. Well, first of all, I've eaten Sejal's home cooked food, and it was phenomenal.
No bias there, right? And yeah.
But well, it's funny because I've been teaching, prenatal clients, students for the last 2 years here in Portland, and saying to them, I recommend Sejal, and I'm, the idea of having her as a postpartum doula almost makes me want to have another baby. Ha 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 ha. With of actually having a baby. So, careful what you say, I guess. We're ecstatic to have our third baby. We adore her, but it was funny. Tell us about yourself and how you support families through the postpartum time.
Well, thank you. I am an early childhood educator. So my one of my passions around parenting is just that understanding of how children work and helping parents to understand different ways of communication and creating connection and normalizing the struggles of those early parenting years, because it's a lot to learn. It's a lot to learn, and we're thrown into the deep end, and then we have to figure it out. And oftentimes we think that we're doing it wrong when there's just like a few little tweaks that can be made. And to normalize the fact that we're like all parents are learning. You don't get thrown into a CEO position it's like getting thrown into a CEO position, right? Without any training whatsoever and zero support. So there's a lot to figure out. And so I love that piece of it. But, and then I also do some postpartum care providing, and my focus in that is mainly some of the more ancient traditional ways of taking care of the body postpartum, like some of the warming practices and like castor oil packs and different things that just help the body to heal. And I like to extend those actually all the way through motherhood during any time a parent is going through a transition. We all need that like cozy, cushy, like care when we're going through something big and we're transitioning into a phase. And sometimes that can just be your kid going off to kindergarten, because that's like a big deal. So
yeah, sounds lovely. That makes me think of the term matrescence, right? This like transition into motherhood, but like that transition, it's ongoing, right? It's like forever and ever. It's never like, and here I am, I've landed. Like you don't land, you're just constantly evolving into it, because your children are constantly evolving and changing. You've never got it down, right?
No, no.
I definitely like feel a little like more on top of things and a little more comfortable and easygoing with this third baby. Like the baby phase feels a little bit less intimidating, but what the heck am I doing with my almost 8-year-old and my almost 5-year-old?
I feel like the tasks get easier, Danielle. Like the tasks, like you figure out like the things. I can do the diapering, I can do the feeding, I know what to expect at this age and stage. But the actual parenting, that never ends. If you think back to your own parents, like, I'm 52 years old and I just talked with my mom this past week. She's still parenting me. And I'm an adult, so it doesn't end.
Yeah, you're still guiding. You're still helping this person become like like a self-actualized kind of person. And so I always say that being a mother has always been like a slow, ongoing series of like tiny grief, like small mornings you're mourning the last this and the last this and the last this and the last this. And there's a lot of excitement in it too, but you're like, and you're not going to need me for this now. And you're not going to need and that.
Yeah.
Which is what you want.
Totally.
But
it is, but we forget to honor, to grieve those little moments. You know, we just rush past them. And how can we take a moment to just like pause and like take that in and know, okay.
Because that's allowed.
Yeah, that's allowed.
I say that to my newly postpartum students that come in, is like, you're allowed to grieve your identity, your former parent, you know, or you were a parent, your former identity, you're allowed to grieve that. And I think it's important to do so, because you have to honor that you're letting something go and you're gaining something, but honoring, you know, your experience in all facets is important. Which is why it's great that we have people that do what all of you do, right? Because you help guide people through that process. So with that in mind, let me hear, Amy, how have you had to pivot in helping families with all that's going on in this past year? I mean, I'm sure it's changed your practice considerably, yeah?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think with a lot of practitioners, it's my first thought was switching to online services, right? So that moms could continue to receive support, knowing that this pandemic and everything that's happened throughout the year would trigger a lot of things. So learning how to be able to still support them via telehealth. So adjusting, because it feels different being in person as it does being online. I also had started the process with registering with the state of Washington. So that helped me to continue to care for my mothers that were across the river, and then also be able to care for mothers as the need continued to grow for mental health services. Telehealth gives like a flexible way of continuing to support moms, gives them flexibility in a safe, comfortable environment. I think the challenge for some moms is they're not able to step away sometimes, but, you know, finding that time for themselves, getting the regular weekly therapy support's really important to help them stay grounded. So that's kind of how my practice transitioned, was mostly now online for now.
Yeah. So that's probably a catch-22, right? Because it's like easier to access, but also you don't get that same kind of me time.
Yeah, it's so important for moms, right? It's important for that, then to have that time to be able to focus on themselves and whatever it is that they're struggling with, and be able to step away.
Yeah. I remember just recently I was driving to the colorectal clinic. After having a third baby, sometimes you need to go to those. And I remember calling my aunt on the Bluetooth in the car and being like, I can't believe how excited I am to be driving to the colorectal clinic because I'm by myself.
Oh my God. Oh, that's good, Danielle.
Yeah. to pivot.
So, you know, it was a pretty intense pivot, because about March 15th, basically, or effectively, I was laid off. I work with Legacy teaching childbirth prep, and I went and talked to my supervisor, and I was like, we can't do this. We have to actually continue to support families. They can't not have anything. And so I'm super proud of my team there, because we all rallied, and we're able to put our entire catalog of offerings up within a month, which is kind of huge. Personally, I moved everything over to Zoom almost immediately. And I was really concerned that it wasn't going to work. My, couples coaching and Becoming Us classes, the class sizes are small or they're private. And there is that piece that Amy was talking about, like, you know, you're in person and you can read each other, and there's a level of community even in those small class circles. And I wasn't sure how it was going to work. In some ways, it's actually been hard for me. I'm an extreme extrovert, and so I'm not getting the same feedback that really helps me personally. So I've had to kind of deal with that. But I think the actual connection has continued. And in whatever way is possible, these folks are still getting this level of support. And in fact, part of what's actually really been beautiful is that I have been in the past confined to just the Portland metro area. And my classes in November, December, I had somebody from California. I had somebody from Indiana. I'm teaching a private class right now with somebody from Indiana. That's my home state, which is probably why they're hollering to me from the Midwest. But I think that it's been helpful so that folks don't have to try and make the drive over. And I have to say, the lack of Portland traffic has meant that we can start earlier, which is really good, I think, for pregnant folks. And I've adjusted my after baby classes for folks who have kids. I've bumped it up to 8 p.m. to start time, which is a little nutty for me because it means I'm teaching until 10 o'clock at night, but it is easier for families. And so that piece is great. But I have appreciated the fact that I can actually make changes that make it life easier for the folks that I'm trying to support.
Yeah. Yeah, lack of traffic. I think lack of driving is just an overall, lining of all of this. Sejal, how about you? How have you needed to pivot, especially with what you do? I mean, you go into people's homes. That's kind of that's the whole thing, right? So how have you managed to shift?
So the first 6 to 7 weeks of the pandemic, I was pretty much at home. I had to make sure that I had all the, masks and gowns that I needed to enter people's homes because we were not sure what was happening with the pandemic in general, like how contagious it was, who was going to transmit to who. And specifically, if you're working with newborn families, you have to be very mindful of, what you bring into their bubble. So that's what I did for the first 7-ish weeks. And then once I was able to procure some N95 masks, I started to see clients for lactation support. And then I had a couple of families who were in desperate need for some postpartum help because all the other experts here chimed in and said that, families and the parents who were part of the panel, the mothers who, talked about being postpartum in this pandemic, was that, the people that they were expecting to help could not come or could not make it. And so there's this balance that these parents had to, kind of decide whether is there a risk for having Sejal come in and help us, or is there a benefit? And what I did initially was I made a few meals at home for them and just dropped them off as a doula. And then eventually they were like, well, it helps having a meal, but we also want help with the newborn care and understanding our baby, how the baby probably wants to be held or probably wants to be fed. And breastfeeding was a challenge for a lot of these families. So what I did was I would meet them in their garage initially. And luckily it was summer, so it wasn't that cold as it is right now. And then eventually they would be comfortable enough for me to come into their homes. So I would possibly be in the kitchen doing my job, and the baby and the parent would be up, away from me. So then I would just do the things that needed to be done and get out of the house. That's how we did. And then gradually, as kind of we learned more about the disease and how COVID spreads and the measures we took, now it's pretty much close to normal how it used to be, where people are okay with me coming into their homes. So I do lactation visits, and what I do is I space them out so that I am not seeing clients back to back, and I have time to come home, take a shower, and then go see another client if I need to. It's a lot of driving for me, but it's worth it for the safety of my families that I work with. That's about it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I imagine lactation help has risen, right? Because stress can really affect the breastfeeding experience. So,
right.
I'm sure it's something that's really needed right now.
Yeah, and I have done some I am also doing virtual lactation help, but sometimes parents are so overwhelmed with there's so much that they need help with, and they are like, we got the virtual piece, we talked to you for an hour, now we want you to come over anyway. So there's been that too. So it's not just that you can only do virtual and get away with it. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, based on how each family is feeling about their situation. So unless we are flexible, one thing that the pandemic has taught us is surrendering, letting go, and being flexible. And that's the hardest part. And that's part of being, a parent, a newborn parent, is our babies teach us to surrender. And it's not the surrender where you're losing a battle or losing a bet. It's more about, well, let's find a new baseline.
Yeah.
The baseline has shifted. So let's kind of talk about that and be angry about it. Absolutely. Be upset about it. Absolutely. Who would have thought, right? But it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to say it sucks. And it did suck for every single one of us, but more so for our new parents. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I imagine.
It's like, I cannot even imagine.
There's a sense of feeling cheated. Like I've said, my third pregnancy, my third baby,
yes.
pregnancy and post in, normal time. And so, for first time parents, I imagine it's really, there's a sense of feeling kind of cheated of this experience of having everybody come and with permission, touch your belly and, smelling the baby
Yeah.
smelling. Everybody misses smelling baby now, right? Yeah. Yeah. Michelle, how about you? How have you had to pivot? Because especially with, a lot of group stuff too, right?
Yeah. All my stuff was group stuff. So I had, I did parent-child classes, and my parent-child classes all had to immediately end and figure out how to still serve those families, because I worked on like a school year program. So we ended in March, and then I wanted to figure out a way for us to stay connected. These were families that had babies from 4 months old to like just over 3 years old. And they were all doing lots of navigating and figuring out lots of different things, and really supporting each other. That was one of my favorite parts, was that they were a support for each other, and I got to kind of hold the container and then provide different bits of information and drop little seeds to think about. So I immediately took it. I took it online, which was interesting because I also teach songs and do stories and puppet plays and do crafting things. So I created a YouTube channel, which I had never done before, and would post all of the things that I would have given them in class, different child development articles and things like that, along with all of the different songs and games and verses and activities that we would have done, put them on the YouTube channel. So that was fun. And then we would just do a weekly, had a weekly parent night. We called it cocktail hour. So they could have a little cocktail, and or your tea or whatever, and we'd get together and just chat and see how everybody was doing. And then the postpartum cafe, Danielle, which was starting to really take off with And Ready, Set, Grow. I tried to take that online, and I don't know, it didn't work so well. I think everyone was getting zoomed out. So so now I've created a completely different program where it's pulled all of those things together, and everybody just gets a weekly email with different things, and they get to sort through it themselves and pick out different pieces that feel like it applies to what they're going through at the time. It's been fun.
Lovely. I really enjoyed the little informational videos you made for
me too.
Also.
Aw, thanks.
Watch. I think that there was a period, especially when the weather was nicer, where people were getting really zoomed out. But now I'm getting requests again for people wanting group things again. I think just the season and people are feeling more isolated because of the weather. Now they're like, can you bring those back? So constantly shifting and pivoting.
Yes.
Some of you touched on this already in talking about how you've pivoted, but if you can maybe elaborate or just talk a little bit about what what has been your biggest challenge in navigating this new normal? Besides, the obvious like tech learning curve, which I've experienced considerably. You're over, I don't know, 25. Like, it's just like, how does this all work? But what else? I mean, we're all business owners. So, while we are all passionate about supporting families, we're also supporting our own families and ourselves. And so I imagine there's like, I know that I've experienced lots of challenges with that. I mean, what would you say has been your biggest challenge, Amy?
The technical stuff for sure. I'm also a mother myself. And so learning to make quick decisions and shift shift direction, not only in my home life, but also in my professional life, has been an interesting experience, I think, for our entire family. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, it was like everyone spread out, find your own place to be, so that everyone can work and kind of function, and then find those times to also come back together. So it's just interesting to try to combine work and living environment into one as a therapist. Sometimes there can be distractions, sometimes interruptions. You just have to be flexible, go with the flow. I think a lot of clients realize this is life. This is home life. It kind of normalizes it for them. Like, oh yeah, you're a person too, It's been an interesting experience this year, I think, for everybody, and we can all relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. We created a room in my house, a studio for me to teach out of. And I realized after the first few classes that because of the vent in the floor, I can hear my son's teacher, hear her every word she says. Asked my students and they can't hear it. So it's fine for their experience of it. But for me, I have to constantly like tune it out. And then if he's like not paying attention and I know and I want to like go intervene and you're in the middle of teaching a client, you can't. It's almost better out of sight, out of mind sometimes, right?
Totally.
For sure.
How about you, Barb?
So we have, I live in a 1,700 square foot home. So I'll just say that this is a green screen behind me. It might look like it's a beautiful, but it's not. It's a green screen. My husband is an amateur podcaster. And so we've got all of the stuff, which has been great. And I'm in this tiny little office, which is also really great. So it's nice and quiet. And when I'm teaching, I can be in the space. But it's also in our basement, which is where the TV is, which is where the Xbox is, which is where, all the things. And so that idea of like, and it took a bit, honestly, to be like, I'm going downstairs to teach now. Everybody needs to shush, right? And then, I mute myself, open the door. I'm actually teaching now. You know what I mean? Like it took a little bit before everybody was like, oh, mom's actually really teaching. Okay, we need to be quiet. I think that's been a challenge. I think one of the things that's been really a boost for me is that my 21-year-old is home instead of in San Francisco, which is a real talk about the loss. My son did not get his senior year in high school. My 21-year-old celebrated in our backyard. You know what I'm saying? Like there's just like when she had her birthday and the whole thing. So there's so many different losses. But one of the gains actually was that I have been wanting to have some kind of an Instagram presence for a long time. And I needed a little hand holding, if I'm going to be really honest with you. And my 21-year-old, she runs the Instagram setup for her school at USF. And so she's like, oh, I can set you up with that. So that's been like a whole like beautiful thing for me. And I feel like it's been a way to plant the seeds like Michelle's talking about, like dropping little bits of information onto my Instagram feed that are really another source of support for folks as they're joining the parenting journey. It feels really, really good and intentional to do these little bits, 3 times a week or whatever it is. So that's been a good thing. I mean, challenging though. Let me tell you, I was like, oh, wait, how do you do what? And how do I post where? And it was a whole thing, but I'm good now. I got it all down. I don't even have to ask her for help at all. Woohoo!
Yeah, social media is a whole other animal. I know. Well, and you've expanded your community, right? So you can people from all over. I mean, we like you said before, we've had students now. I'm from Philly originally, so I get like students from Philly and New York, and I'm like, hey, what's up, East Coast?
Yeah, that's awesome. So good.
Cool. So Sejal, I know you talked a little bit about the challenges already. Is there anything you'd like to add about like what has been your biggest challenge during this time? Personal or professional, I mean, they're all kind of intermingled at this point, aren't they?
Yeah, I would like to talk about both. If that's okay, because again, it's all about being human and not being this well put together. So my room right now is kind of a shit show because I haven't like cleaned it, and my bedroom has become my office. So there's that, and we have to kind of be quiet for each other if we are too close in the room next to each other, where I have to remind them that, hey, I'm really working here. I know you used to see me go out and work, but now it's like work inside the house. And so we have to schedule, like, okay, who gets to use the bathroom, when, all of those things. So even though there are 2 bathrooms, there's still like 4 of us. So sometimes it can get tricky. And, I have also learned to let go of my expectation of how I should be working. Or how I serve my clients, because I had this expectation of myself that, oh, this is how you should be doing lactation or postpartum. And now that's not the case, because some things are not accessible to me and to my clients both. So if I'm suggesting something to my clients let's say you need to get this particular tool for breastfeeding or help postpartum, it may not be delivered on time. And so how do we kind of come up with solutions that are already present in the home? Of course, it decreases the, ecological footprint in terms of how we are polluting the environment. But there's been some novel ideas that have showed up in my head and in my client's head, and like, oh, we don't need this stuff. Actually, we don't need 10,000 pillows for breastfeeding or, things like that. So, and sometimes you do. So if you have access to it, good for you. If you don't, then we have to make do with what we have. And I think technology, I still am not a big fan of doing virtual visits, to be very honest. I would love to see people in person, because we are not meant to be like characters on a screen. We are meant to be actually engaging with other humans. I think that has been the biggest challenge for me, and the lack of touch. Big one. But now that we have masks available to everybody, and hopefully the vaccine, then we'll probably get onto the place where we're able to touch each other again. Because holding babies is part of my job as well. So it was very hard to be like, oh, hold your baby like this. And they're like, how? What are you talking about? On the screen, it's harder. Like placement.
Sejal, I feel like when this is all over, we can actually touch people again. Like the person who delivers my mail, the barista, like they better stand back, because I'm going to be like, bring it in. It's been a while. I gotta calm down. But
yeah,
I mean, I'm an Italian woman from Philadelphia. We're known to hug everybody. So yeah, I'm gonna hug all of you.
Totally.
Speaking of challenge, my partner just popped his head in and said, should I give her a bottle? Give her a bottle.
Have a big cuddle puddle.
Yes, maybe that's what we'll do at the studio. We'll have a giant hug fest.
Oh my God, so much oxytocin. Yes.
Yeah.
Something too that has to have affected people's experience of postpartum. It's just less oxytocin, right? Because you're not. I mean, my dad and stepmom and my in-laws, they haven't been able to snuggle the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, I think that just being able to snuggle with your partner becomes more accessible if you have a partner at home. So I say, hey, bring in the oxytocin, make out like you're in college, and kind of let the milk flow and the love flow. I mean, as the parents look at me like, what is going on with you? I was like, I'm just saying, that's an idea to let the milk flow.
Watch an episode of Bridgerton and get busy. But
oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah.
My partner to watch Bridgerton. It's not usually his but he totally watched it with me. And more, right? I mean, I'm a snuggler, but like normally I'd wear the baby. I'd also be putting her in the car. I'd be going back and forth, driving my kids to school. And now I do a lot of, my thumb is really messed up because I'm doing so much work on my phone while my baby sleeps on me, which, you know, I'll take it. That's a fair trade, I think. Thumb schmuck. Who hasn't spoken about this? Michelle, yes. Sorry, the got mixed up. I love it.
I would say one of the challenges is just trying to figure out how to bring people together, because one of my core goals in the work that I do is for other mothers and parents to be able to hear others' experiences so that they know that they're not the only ones, so that they have some sense of like, oh, this is normal. Like, this is really hard and this is normal. And you get to hear other people's stories and what they're going through in real time. And so that's been hard on my heart, really, you know, like, first of all, trying to figure out how to make that actually happen, and then to know that it's not. And I just think of the moments like the moms would come in, and if a mom was tired and she came into my class, like, I would take her child, I would hold the child, and I would literally set her up like with blankets and pillows. So she had 10 minutes or 15 minutes to rest. So,
Seen you do that.
Yeah. So that, you know, that's been hard to not be able to support in that way. But then it's interesting because my parent coaching business has increased, of course. And then the challenge of just, again, like everyone said, figuring out a space, because we have kids in college that aren't, you know, living at home, but they wanted to come home. And then the house is full again of all these adults, which is wonderful. And I wouldn't trade it for anything, but my office all of a sudden has to be moved somewhere, anywhere. I don't know, the dining room table, the laundry room, wherever it can fit. So yeah, it's been good. And there's the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. I think everyone's gotten good at being like the traveling office.
Yeah.
So what would be your first suggestion for entering the postpartum time now in this situation? Amy?
Well, I think just like Barb was talking about the postpartum plan, I think in that plan to identify supports, like start brainstorming now of what supports you can have and how and in what ways. Because it might just be like the regular Zoom call meeting to your best friend or your mom. And for other families, it might be creating a plan where a family member is able to like quarantine and come and visit. It's different for every family and different things will work. But starting to brainstorm and kind of think about what will work for you is a major thing. And I think it's important for these families to remember this is not a normal year, right? And so the ways we approach things might look different. I think that sometimes moms can be really hard on themselves. I've seen a lot of shame and guilt of like, why aren't I doing this? You know, why can't I function in a way I expect myself to? Because this is not a normal year. It's been really hard on so many levels. And it's also important to find ways to stay grounded and balanced. The world is trying to heal. There's a lot of uncertainties, which can be really unsettling. So the more we can try to ground ourselves in the day-to-day moments and day-to-day life and time with each other during the postpartum time can help us feel just a little more stable, you know, things that we can have control over and feels normal in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important in any, it's always important in the postpartum time to give yourself a lot of grace, but especially now. And the thing that I've been trying to really stay on top of as a parent of kids who are a little older too, is I have to remember that like our children are also experiencing this collective trauma. Like this is something that everyone is experiencing. And just because everyone's experiencing it doesn't mean it's any it affects you any less. So, you know, sometimes when my kids really seem like they're, you know, way extra, I have to remember they're navigating trauma, you know, and they're doing a great job. I mean, all in all, I would say our kids are doing a pretty great job of navigating all of this. They're little teachers too, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Forever and ever. That's another thing. They're forever and ever things.
Yep.
You think you got it figured out, but you don't. How about you, Barb? Advice?
So I would say, you know, that idea of like having a plan, the biggest piece that I would say is that they really need to not just think about who it is that they're going to have and call on for support. They need to write the names down. And if it's a couple, they don't have to have the same names, but they need to identify who their people are. And in my classes, oftentimes I'll say, one of the things that I want you to be very, very clear about is who are helpers and who are visitors. Because regardless of where we are in this year, for really the first several months, visitors shouldn't be allowed within 20 feet of your home. I mean, you know, and visitors are the folks that are like, you know, let me hold the baby. And, you know, as they're bouncing the baby, what are we having for dinner tonight? Like, oh my God, who are those people? Like, they need to not show up until you've got it under your belt a little bit. And so if you're going to have folks that are going to be coming in that early postpartum time, they are helpers. And they are the folks that will do exactly what Sejal is talking about doing, honestly. They need to be folks that are making you delicious food. They're holding your baby, but only so that you can sleep or take a shower, and only at your request. They are scrubbing your toilets for you. They're doing all the laundry, and they know when it's time to get out. And so if you don't have that as a helper in your corner, hire a postpartum doula, because they know. They have a very, very clear idea what their boundaries are. I'm going to shut up because I know Sejal is going to talk about this part, but I feel like that part is super, super important, and identifying who your 3 a.m. person is. And in my mind, the 3 a.m. person is the person that you know that literally, if you need to, they'll drop whatever they're doing and they will come. Either physically come, or they will they'll get on the other line with you at any point. Now, the part that's really hard is that's great. People are like, you know, I do it in classes and people are like, oh yeah, my 3 a.m. person. And then they come back next week. I'm like, did you tell your 3 a.m. person that they're your 3 a.m. person? They're like, no, I haven't done that yet. I'm like, oh no. It's a wasted exercise to identify these people if you then don't ask them or let them know. And I think in particular, in our culture, asking for help is not something that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be able to do this thing alone as a mother, and if we're partnered, between the two of us. But that should be it. And that is BS. There's nothing about this that's supposed to be done by one or two people. And so when you identify that 3 a.m. person, this is the part that I know to be true. Think about how excited and what an honor it is to be identified as the 3 a.m. person. Because each of us, we are somebody's 3 a.m. person, and we know that. And when you get that feeling of like, yeah, this person really, they're choosing me. They're saying, you're my person. It's such a gift to the person that you identify. And so I have to tell people that, but I'm telling you, once you've actually communicated it, it takes so much pressure off of you, because you're like, I've already done the thing. I've already told them, listen, if things get rough, I'm calling you. And I think too, just one last thing, I'm hearing from folks that parents who would normally be like, I'm coming over and I'm making you casseroles and I'm doing the whole thing. And they can't, because either the new parents have decided that risk of having them in their space is not okay right now, or whatever. What ends up happening is oftentimes these grandparents kind of drop the ball. And I don't mean to like put it on the GPs here, but they don't really know how to support if they're not making casseroles. And so I think it's really important, and kind of, it's unfortunate that it goes back on the shoulders of the new parents, but you need to say, I need you to check in with me every Friday, at least with a text. And I will tell you whether or not I need to actually talk or whether I'm good, but I need somebody that's going to be checking in on me weekly or 3 times a week or every day, whatever it is for you. But doing those pieces and putting them in place will give you the structure of support in very, very unstructured times. And I think it's super important for folks to do that. It's unfortunate that we have to do it for ourselves, but I think that's where we are right now.
I love that. I love the writing it down, I think, is really key, because everything's so nebulous. Time becomes this kind of non-existent thing, and to have somebody who their job is to kind of just keep track, I think is really important. You know, well, I don't want to talk too much about that. You know, I joke that like a postpartum doula sometimes gets to be the heavy, and they just write the notes of like, you do not enter this home unless you do these things. Love the doula. Like, so the mom, dad, or the parents don't have to say it, but somebody needs to say it, because if you're coming over and you're just holding the baby and not doing some dishes, then you gotta get out of here. Sejal, do you want to kind of elaborate? I'm sure you and Barb have similar advice. Gosh, my baby's crying really loud.
Remind me the question again. Sorry. Tell me the question again.
What's your first suggestion? What's your first suggestion to a family who is about to be postpartum in this time?
So Amy and Barb kind of beautifully said that, you know, that support and saying no is the hardest thing for anybody, including myself. But, you know, what I also tell parents is that having a baby tells you or shows you who your family is to you, who your friends are to you. And it's okay to have new friendships and new families, because sometimes that is what it requires from us to say that, no, this is not working for me, whether it's coming from a family or from a friend, right? And the second thing I would tell parents to think about is nutrition, because the one thing your brain kind of thrives on, the only nutrient your brain thrives on, is glucose. So if you do not have food, you can't think straight. Nutrition, if you can take care of your nutrition, that would be super, super important. And make foods that are your favorite for a change. Don't expect your friends or family to make them for you. They may not even remember, because they are also in a pandemic. Whether they want to or not is different. But just kind of prepare, if you're pregnant right now, prepare those meals, write those recipes down, and then practice them with your partner right now. Because if you're pregnant, you can do all of these things. If you try making a thing that you want your partner to learn right when you're postpartum, not a good idea. We really want to practice all of these things while we are pregnant. Don't neglect your thoughts. If you are upset, angry, sad, all valid thoughts. And people like Amy, Barb, Michelle, all of us, we are all trying to be there for all the parents that we can be there for, and there's lots of us. It's not just, us who are on the screen here. All you have to do is keep looking until you find the right person for you.
Yeah, especially if you're in Portland. I mean, my joke is like, you'd be hard pressed to like, not hit a doula throwing a ball out your front door. Like,
totally.
Support professionals in this town, and not be true in other areas. So we're really kind of blessed out here to have so much support, for sure. And meal trains. Lots of people did meal trains for us, which was so wonderful. Even I love a home cooked meal, but every once in a while I'll be like, oh, I really miss that ramen from that place. And then somebody bring it to us, like, yes.
It's awesome.
Michelle, what would be your first suggestion?
My first suggestion is to simplify. Simplify. Do less and lower your expectations. We are in a culture where we move so fast and we do so much, and our sense of value comes from our doing. And if there are places that we can eliminate certain things and we can do less and not hold ourselves to as high of an expectation, and give more room for what is there, and to not move so fast. And it's hard. Sometimes it takes a little bit of taking an inventory of your life and figuring out what are the things that I can let go, or I'm willing to let go, and then lowering the expectations. Like I talk to parents about, have popcorn and smoothies for dinner tonight. Like scrambled eggs is just fine. Like let's not cook a big meal because you're just too tired and it's not going to work. And the kids have been screaming or the baby's been crying all day. And like, what can you do that just meets the basic need without having to go above and beyond? Because we can just simplify. And that can be, simplifying our time, simplifying the things around us in our environment. There's lots of different ways. It's one of my favorite things that I love in working with parents. And then the other thing is, if we don't have each other to increase our oxytocin, nature provides a tremendous amount of oxytocin for us. So in those moments where we're feeling isolated and we can't have that connection that we crave so much to another human being, get outside in your garden, take a walk, go to the park, just even down the street in your neighborhood and notice the flowers and the smell in the air. And that will help uplift.
That was a huge like lesson in our family with the pandemic was we just going every single day on a walk and just walking around our neighborhood. We didn't always have to we weren't going to the playground because they were closed. We weren't, no destination. We were just going for a walk every day. And that's something that seems so like, well, duh, people have been doing that forever, but we didn't really do that very often. And now it is a non-negotiable. We go for a walk. I mean, if it's coming down like really hard, we don't. But most of the time we do. We get out and we go for a walk. What you were talking about that slowing down reminds me, and I'm not going to like recite it or anything, but go check out a poem. When this all started, I started reading this poem at the end of my prenatal classes, and I just think it's so beautiful. It's by a poet named Pablo Neruda. I don't know if...
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And it's called Keeping Quiet. And it's really, really lovely. Michelle, I feel like maybe I already shared that with you. I might have shared that with you already. But anyway, if you ever think of it or if you have a minute, go check out the poem Keeping Quiet. Pablo Neruda. It's really lovely. It speaks to this kind of surreal environment that we find ourselves in. Or at least we did when it first hit, right? Where everything was just stopped.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Yeah. So another little request for advice. We talk a lot about in the new, when parents are new and they have a new baby, isolation is a big issue for new parents. Under normal circumstances, isolation can feel overwhelming, especially for the primary care parent, not provider, that's a doctor. The primary care parent, the one who's home, often the one who's feeding baby, the one that's not going off to work in the first, fourth trimester, the first month or 2, 3. It's been amplified, right? So what advice for just navigating that kind of sense of isolation would you have, Amy?
I would start with being kind and patient with yourself. This is a really challenging time. Some parents are finding themselves overwhelmed, even kind of lashing out and feeling that pressure, that tense sensation of being kind of trapped and being in the same space and away from all of their supports. So just remembering that, like, this is really hard, giving yourself grace. Families are coming up with really creative ideas to stay connected with others. Even though we have to be isolated due to the pandemic, there are ways we can still try to connect with others. Some families are coming up with support bubbles of other families that are quarantining and that feel safe for them. It might be look like a long distance walk, or connecting with someone at a distance at a park, online connecting like a Zoom meeting, like whatever it takes, at the level, whatever you feel comfortable with, to try to reduce some of those feelings of isolation, and finding new normals, So the new normal right now might be connecting on a regular basis through a Zoom meeting. It's not the same, of course, as being in person, but just getting out there, like stepping out, making sure you're going outside, taking that breath of fresh air, walking around, remembering that it's not just, where you're at in your day-to-day living. There's other things out there. And just remembering this isn't forever. It's felt like forever because we've been doing this for so long, but this is just where we're at in this moment. Trying not to worry too far in advance. And I guess lastly, I would say is find something to look forward to. Some people are doing this and making plans, future plans of people they want to see, or someone who might come for a visit in the future, and, find something to look forward to. Kind of pulls you out of that feeling of isolation and remembering that there's something beyond, there are people that that you're connected with.
Yeah. Great advice. We did form a pod with one family, and it was very lucky. They're a few doors up, and their children are the same age, and they're really the first thing we had a whole conversation over text. What are you doing to be safe? What are your COVID kind of rules? And we were in alignment, so we decided to go ahead and make a pod, and it's been really good for the mental health of our children, but also for us, honestly. Yeah. And then, depending on how you feel about having a glass of wine while breastfeeding, I fully support and know that you're allowed to do that. I've been breastfeeding for over 7 years, so I haven't had a glass of wine. But I have a weekly, what we call a face wine date with a girlfriend in Santa Fe.
That's awesome.
Yeah, face wine. We have a glass of wine and we just check in and have a chat, and it's nice. It's a nice thing to look forward to. So I support that piece of advice. What about you, Barb? What would you?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've all probably come to know about ourselves during this time, because my word for 2020 moving into 2021 has been self-reflection, which has been really interesting. There's been a lot of that going on. And I think one of the things that we collectively are starting to recognize is whether or not we are a true extrovert, an introvert, or an ambivert. And so I'm going to talk to the extroverts and the introverts there. My husband, who to the world would be an extreme extrovert, is not. This guy, if you ask him, he's like, I was built for the pandemic. He loves like being in the house. I'm like, oh, wow, that is really different from me. I am, as I said, an extreme extrovert. And so from the extrovert standpoint, I think that we need to get very real about and honest about our desires and our needs to be with other people in a safe way. Okay. So masked up and 6 feet apart. I don't know if folks know this. I have a certificate in interpersonal neurobiology. And so our actual fields, if you want to think of it this way, extend out about 3 feet around us in all directions. So when you're actually within 6 feet of another person, you're actually getting the good stuff of that other person. It's like it's not quite the same as a hug, but it is like you're actually really connected in that way. And so, I've gotten really creative. I've done some coffee gates where, on a nasty day, even it doesn't have to be nice out, we pull our cars back together and flip up the back and sit and drink our coffee with a covered area so that we are not in the rain if we need to. I've had several friends who've actually gotten solo stoves or whatever and have figured out ways to actually be, I have a lot of extroverted friends, so that would be why that happens. But I think it's really important for extroverts and new or expecting parents to find ways that they can connect in person with other people. And if you don't know about the app, I think it's called Peanut. It's like Tinder for new moms. You can swipe left as many times as you want. And you could find somebody that feels like there'd be a cool fit for you, and then just meet them for a walk. So, and either this will blossom into a really phenomenal friendship, or it will be a nice walk. and you talk to somebody for an hour. So that could be good. For the introverts, I really want to stress that it's still important that you actually get the heck out of the house, because we're in a time right now where if that's not your nature, you're not out in the world trying to make connections in this way, you still actually need to not be confined to your house. The isolation, or that sense of isolation, can happen just from being stuck within four walls. So again, also not what do I want to say about this? This is for everybody. Being able to actually leave the house by yourself and alone. And we already heard Danielle, who is like thrilled to be going to her colorectal clinic appointment. That happens because we need a break. And so as soon as the baby is able to be fed by your partner, if you are partnered, then I would suggest to every new parent that you get out of Dodge for like 4 hours or more. It's really, really great for your baby to have their own individual relationship with the other parent. And it's so, so important for you to really be able to retain a part of you that says, who was I before I became a parent? Are they still in there? Oh, they are. And so being able to actually be with yourself can cut down a little bit on that sense of isolation as well. Those would be my things.
So with that in mind, I raised my camera enough so that you can't see, but my baby was not taking a bottle. So she is here with us having a little drink. I found out that I am not an extrovert.
I think a lot of people have.
I love home a lot. I'm an ambivert, sure, but yeah, it's interesting. And as a parent of a sensory-seeking child, I really liked that you talking about that 3 feet around, because I talk all the time about my bubble. And I need to stay out of my bubble for a little bit. And now that the baby's here, both children want to be on top of the baby, which is on top of me. So for me, it's, instead of needing to be around people, I need to away from my family for
I think that that's perfectly, I mean, that's that piece of like that self-awareness. I think that the pandemic has really put a pause button in a very big way. And like Michelle was talking about, you know, that ability to not be so busy is one way, but the other way is to really know ourselves. I mean, we've had to like stop and be like, well, what do I really think? This is like, the world has been put on pause. And I think that there's something really beautiful, painful, and very helpful in this time to actually figure out who we are and what matters to us.
Sejal, how about you?
You know, wonderful resources have been mentioned by Barb and also by Amy. I think that a lot of us are also doing Zoom groups where we are virtually meeting once a week, and it's a drop-in. Anybody can join if you have a baby. I also tell my mamas who come to the group to bring their partners if they're available. And I tell them that if you have pregnant friends, let them come. Let them join us and see how they see postpartum, right? Everybody's postpartum is different. What we read in books versus what we actually see in real life can be two very different things. But it's a part of, I think, my passion is that I want pregnant folks to understand that they really need to know what a normal postpartum is, and from different perspectives, right? If we don't allow us to observe things, how are we going to learn? So if you have pregnant folks in your neighborhood or in your friend circle and you had a baby, invite them to those groups. You know, I know Ready, Set, Grow has a, I think, postpartum group. Danielle, do you guys have it?
Yeah. Prenatal, a pregnancy one again too, like a
full so that's where I think unless pregnant people see how other babies are feeding, other parents are handling the pandemic, they are not going to learn, because we don't have a book on how to be postpartum in a pandemic yet. It hasn't been that long, right? So like I said, I didn't know about the Peanut app, so that's a great resource. Amy said that, you know, giving yourself grace is another thing that I would agree with Amy on. Like, we have to, every single one of us, including professionals, have to give ourselves grace because we are too hard on ourselves. And then I also would like to say that there are free groups available. If you are a parent who is, I am seeing a lot more parents who have lost their jobs, been laid off, or their partners have even lost their jobs and they are unable to pay the fees. But a lot of us are also trying to meet those needs, right? Where we are trying to support these parents who are not able to pay us. And that's okay, but the ultimate goal for all of us should be, how do we care for each other? Yeah, there is finances. Yes, we want all of us to sustain our businesses, but also there's the human piece to it that we have to remember. And it is okay to ask if you're struggling, and that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of people are offering sliding scale stuff. I know we are, and offering scholarships and things. And then the people that can afford to pay the higher rates are choosing to do so because it's then it's then recycled back into giving to the people that can't. So that's really great. And I saw one of the women in the videos that Sarah mentioned, the thing that she missed was seeing other parents struggle. Is to your experience of being a parent, to see other parents not be a successful Pinterest TV show mom and struggle, because it's validating and it helps you realize that you're not going to be perfect all the time, right? Or half the time you're not going to be perfect. So anyway, this is Georgie. She was, so here she is, and trying not to do this, but
no, it's awesome. It's perfect.
Perfect example of how you have to be flexible.
Exactly.
So Michelle, question: how do you stave off the isolation?
Yeah. Well, I second everything that has been said. The groups, finding ways to connect with other people, everything that Amy said. I mean, all yes. I'll just, because all of that was said and was on my list of things that I was thinking about, I'll take just a slightly different approach, in that the isolation can sometimes stem from the repeating of the same thing over and over and over, and the mundane just being overwhelming, and every day feeling the same. And so this idea that I love to work with in finding that mundane work, that everyday work, as part of the sacredness of what you do as a nurturer, as a caregiver, as a life giver, as a life sustainer, and seeing if you can get really clear on the things that you really strive in, and the places that you are thriving and working towards. You're striving. Places that you're striving and you're working towards, and the places that you're thriving, where you're doing really well, and to kind of look at those, and that idea of giving yourself more grace in the places that you're striving towards and where you're thriving, to relish in those, and to find the juiciness and the pleasure and the joy in doing the dishes or folding the laundry, or figuring out ways to do it that feel fun and exciting. Like maybe you're doing the dishes and you've been doing the dishes for, this is like the 4th time you're doing a sink of dishes for that day. Like, can you turn on a song that you can dance to? Is there, can you put on some, essential oils, or do something that makes it joyful and fun and playful, so that everyday task becomes a little bit yummier.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I'm going to reverse the order. So Michelle, you're not always going last on this. We did something the other day where we put the kids in the other room and put a movie on and let them eat dinner in front of the TV, and then we ate dinner, just the two, the baby. but without the talking and without the interacting and the engaging with our older children. And we're like, oh my gosh, why have we not been doing this the whole time?
You gotta do that weekly.
Right?
Yeah.
Take a date night at home, right?
Yeah. Starting to like let the things that we think we're supposed to do, or the ways that we think we're supposed to do them, start redefining them for like, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? Dinner and dishes and laundry and cleaning the toilet. Like, I don't know, do you want to put on a clown hat and like a cape and, you know, like that makes cleaning the toilet fun for you? Do that.
Get a wig. Get a colored wig. With
Yes.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Groundhog Day. How do you get out of
Right.
Yeah.
Because that increases that feeling of isolation, just doing the same.
I lost the love of cooking for 3 months, and I love cooking, and I just didn't want to cook anymore. Oh my gosh, we still have to eat another. We still food. We have to eat and do dishes and, you know, repeat. And just recently, I kind of came back and I made some fancy thing I had to cook all day, and it was great.
We're coming over.
Change it up. So what have you noticed, Michelle, I'm going to start with you. What have you noticed are the biggest factors at play in this new postpartum experience?
Well, isolation.
Extreme isolation.
Extreme isolation. And one of the things that I've noticed is this real exposure of the imbalance of expectation of the caregiver's role. That even when we are in partnerships that really seem 50-50, that there is one person that is really holding, that is really holding that sort of mental load and that bigger weight. And that person is still expected. It's just amazing to me how the veil has been torn off of that person is still expected to do everything, you know, that other people, like, you know, working out in the world, if you're doing that and being a parent at the same time, and then it not being valued. That work as the nurturer and caregiver is not being valued and that you still have to be doing the other stuff. You still have to be doing all of the other things. And that exposure, you know, to be valued. So that exposure has been really interesting for me to see. And it's unfair and makes me really upset.
Smash it.
Yeah.
That's a huge factor in what our patriarchal society, that could be a whole other panel. Let's make a request. Olivia.
Yeah. Oh, that's one of my, I already have goosebumps. That's one of my fire points. I'll tll you all just like.
Yep. Right there with you. Sejal, what do you think are the biggest factors in your experience?
Repeat the question for me.
What have you noticed are the biggest factors at play in this new postpartum experience, this COVID postpartum experience?
I think the fear that it brought upon all of us was the biggest one, because if people were already fearful, their fear went up even more. So it kind of doubled or tripled, and it magnified everything. But it also brought a lot of the issues that were not quite on the surface come up, and it made us pay attention to those issues individually and collectively, right? So it's not just one particular family issue, it's a global issue now. So it's a collective thought process that led to where we are right now, obviously, but it's also a collective challenge. And it didn't see a difference between rich, poor, well-to-do, not well-to-do, able to have a baby, not able to have a baby. All of those folks had the same challenge. I think that was like the equalizer for, unfortunately it was, but I think it also taught us to pay attention to what's happening around the world and not just be in this bubble that America likes to be in.
Agreed. Yeah, there's a huge factor in being a new parent anyway, right? All of a sudden, your own, humanity and your own, impermanence.
Yeah.
Really obvious. Barb, how about you?
I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Michelle started to say. The idea of the work of parenting in our culture is absolutely ignored and devalued, and that's very upsetting to me. It's a hot point for me. I believe that raising the next generation is truly the most important work you'll ever do, and I mean that sincerely. And it's also the hardest work you're ever going to do. To that end, I think that that we have to kind of like talk about the elephant in the room, which is, so I'm off work for X number of weeks because I gave birth, but I'm planning to go back to work at some point. My partner is off on leave, which is great because the leave has gotten a little bit longer than, it used to be back in the day, right? So maybe anywhere from a week to maybe 6 weeks or more. That's great, lovely. At some point, that person's going to go back to work before the person who gave birth. And if you do not make a plan about what that's going to look like, and I mean a solid plan, it's going to be horrible. It's going to be horrible because you have to find the space in your room or in your house that you can actually work from. But the person who's given birth to the baby should still be able to do the parenting job, the work of parenting, without having to be super quiet, without having to, do you know what I'm saying? So there's like pieces there that you have to be really, really clear about that. And then the boundaries need to be really set up. So if I am the primary caregiver, we've decided that you're down in the basement office working from 9 until 5. If it's been a rough day, I'm going to be texting you at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and saying, when you show up at 5:05, you get the kid. Yeah. And I'm walking out the door and taking a walk. Like it's something that I would have said to people if their partner was away at the office. Give them a little bit of a buffer time so that they know they are on duty when the Zoom meetings end and they are now primary parent while you get to take a break or whatever. If you're going to make the boundaries around, we're not going to start your workday until I get a shower in, which I would suggest every postpartum parent gets a shower every single day, whenever that's possible. Then we need to set up those boundaries, right? And so that our partners are not like, I've got a meeting. That's not going to work. Like there has to be a plan in place. And this is true for literally folks that are 12 years out. I have an 11-year-old right now. We have conversations about our boundaries for the day. What does the day look like? And I have come to this place. I just want to kind of share this for folks. I have said to my children more than once, you have 2 parents. So go ask your other parent. I'm working right now. Go ask your other parent. I don't know why you identify me as the only one who can do X, Y, Z, but your dad is downstairs right now and I'm in the middle of something. So go ask your father. It took a little bit for them to kind of like get into that zone because I have been the person who's been primarily at home, and that makes sense. We got 2 parents in the space. We got 2 parents in the space. That's what I'm going to say about that. If you're lucky enough to be partnered in this situation, or if that's what you're hoping and wanting in your experience, 2 parents. So that's an important piece, I think.
Well, and I love that you said, and go for a walk, because I always say to new parents, if you can hear the baby, it's not
Agreed.
Your entire body responds to the sound of your baby. So if you're taking a shower, you can hear your screaming baby. It's not a relaxing shower.
Totally.
Take the baby out of the house while I take a shower or somewhere where I can.
Yep.
Amy, do you have anything to add for this last question? The biggest factors. Well, we have a closing question, but this is our last.
Yeah. I think from a mental health perspective, I know we've kind of talked about this already, but the isolation has a huge toll on people mentally, emotionally. They're feeling physically cut off, sometimes relationally cut off and disconnected. So that's important to take note and connect as much as possible. Also putting in that self-care for ourselves, knowing that we're going through this challenge, making sure we're getting sleep, making sure we're getting nourishment, water, exercise, right? Stepping out into the fresh air, all those nourishing things that keep us going. We have to remember that we're getting them. I think all of those things helps with isolation and all the mental toll. Also the pressure, kind of like we've been talking about of I tell my mothers, if you have a partner, you're a team. Don't forget that. It's okay to tag team. It's okay to tap out. Moms feel this tremendous amount of pressure to be all and do all, and feel guilty because their partner's working in the other room. And I remind them, you're working too. It's a job. It's a job taking care of others. And so trying to work through that guilt of feeling like you have to be all. And I guess the last thing I would add is that grief and loss is huge and needs to be acknowledged. People have lost people physically, but then also mothers have lost the ideal pregnancy they were going to have. Sometimes they've lost the celebrations they thought they would have, or the supports, the experience they thought they would have. And it's okay to acknowledge that and process that and work through that because it's real.
In-person baby showers.
Yeah.
If that's your thing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I want to say one thing too, is if you have someone who is helping support you as the brand new birthing parent, like especially when you're healing from birth and stuff, set them up for success. Somebody was talking about Sejal, I think you were talking about making making meals, writing down recipes or whatever. I have on the dry erase board in the kitchen my favorite smoothie recipe, and I have
That's awesome.
First the strawberries, then the apples, then and do it like this. And I wrote in this order. And, top it off with kale because I got to get in my greens or whatever it is. Blend on high. Very, very, very specific. I want that teal straw with the rubber. Because those little details.
Yes.
Those little details can really they can be so grounding, and they can really just, that little bit of self-care or, partner care or whatever can really make a difference. So our closing question, we're going to end with, we're going to end on a high note. Can you share your silver lining that you found from working with families with new babies during this time, during the pandemic? What's your silver lining? Sejal, you go first. Jump all the way.
No pressure, huh? So when it all started, it was there was what I heard from myself and everybody around me was a lot of despair. And I think collectively that despair kind of also brought hope. So I think what I feel like, yes, we are grieving these expectations that we have of ourselves, of how our postpartum would be looking like, or how our life would be looking like without being postpartum even. I think that it has brought a resilience that we didn't even know we had, and hope, and the ability to adapt is, people have adapted, and we are still adapting. So to be a witness to that, specifically for my postpartum families, is, I think, a silver lining for me.
Learning how strong you can be and people can be. Beautiful. That's beautiful. Barb, you want to go next?
Sure. So I have been telling all of my families something that I feel very, very true. And I can kind of relate to them, even though my kids are so grown. My second was a 9/11 baby. I was pregnant when 9/11 happened. That was a really, really challenging time. As a pregnant person, I had this feeling of like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm bringing this baby into this world when these kinds of things can happen. And I don't know how I feel about that. And I would just say that my son and every 18-year-old that I know is a very special person. Something happens in the collective consciousness of these babies that are coming to us when things in the world are also happening. And so I really strongly believe that the babies that are being born during this pandemic are the exact people our world needs. I think that they are going to understand connection and the deep desire to create deep, strong, lasting connection because they feel it. It is in our bodies as we're carrying them, this longing that we want to be with our people. Our babies are absorbing that. And I think that they're going to be the ones that actually are able to create connection in new ways. And then the other thing that I just want to say, and this is a quote, I don't know if I've ever figured out who said it, but to the world, you can be one person. You might be just one person, but to one person, you might be the world. And so I just want to also kind of share with the parents that you might be having these thoughts of, oh, my baby's not going to be held by the aunties and the cousins and the grandparents and the everybody else. And they're not going to have any socialization because, we're not able to actually be in baby groups in person and all this kind of good stuff. To your baby, they have won the baby lottery. They're like, what? I get to spend all of this time with you? And when we saw that mom in the opening clip, when she was talking about, if it weren't for the pandemic, my baby would be back in childcare right now. And there's all kinds of reasons why that would be great. But she's also really loving the fact that she gets to work from home while her baby's strapped to her chest. Your babies are thrilled. And so I don't want anybody to feel like, oh no, my poor child. They're way more resilient than we ever think about. And they are loving life right now because they get you all to themselves. It's fantastic.
Yeah. We named our daughter Georgia. She was born on the day, like the November 6th. And we waited a day to give her name until we got the election results in Georgia. So yeah, getting asked what her name was. We're like, wait, hold on. Let's turn on the TV. We'll let you know. Anyway, interesting time to be born.
Yeah.
The glass ceiling is shattered. We had a baby girl. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Michelle, silver lining.
I would say there's an increase in compassion. There's been this, these mommy wars for so long of like, you're doing it wrong, like this whole thing. And all of a sudden we're all in the same boat. And there's this like, no matter who you are or where you are or what your situation, it's this group of parents and mothers that are in the same boat. And I feel for you. Like I feel for you. And that in a world where there's so much division right now, I love that there's this place that we can just really have. It's so clear to have compassion for one another and what this group of humans are going through right now. So silver lining.
Amy.
I think it's important to remember that there's positive aspects to slowing down. We're so used to go and moving through the daily parts of life that we can miss out on so much. So there's positive aspects to that. I think it also can create ways for us to connect intimately with others in ways that maybe we didn't have the opportunity to do before. It's also forced us to become really, really creative, tap into our creative sides and find different ways of handling things. And I think it gives us the opportunity to connect with ourselves, right? It gives us the opportunity, if we're slowing down and finding time for ourselves, then we can really reconnect with ourselves, especially as mothers, because once you put on that mom hat, right, suddenly you're mom and you can kind of miss having that time with yourself. And I think over the past year, it's easy to think about all the things we've missed out on, all the loss, all the grief, which is real. But it's important to remember sometimes we can really attach to like negative things and hold on really tight. And then that's when we can really dip into despair. So then what's the flip side of that? Like, what have we gained? What are some amazing things that have come through the situations we've been kind of forced into? What have we gotten out of it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lovely. Well, I've learned that the My Breast Friend pillow is the best pillow for while nursing a baby. Officially now.
That's awesome. Aww. Well done.
Thank you. I did hit the mute a couple times. It has been an absolute pleasure and an honor to be in community with you women. I am, I feel really excited and grateful that you're all out there in the world helping parents during this unprecedented times. And I think that's how we're going to wrap it up. Let's wrap it up with silver linings, right?
Thank you so much for having us.
It was great.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah and Olivia.
Yeah.
Another wonderful topic and another wonderful group of smart people. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beep and
beep, beep, beep. Thanks for watching. If you liked our channel, please make sure that you hit the button at the bottom and subscribe so you don't miss any other videos we have coming up.
If you want to know the moment we post, hit that little bell.
Ding, ding. We're also on Facebook and Instagram.
At The Parent Trip PDX.
And we have a Patreon that we'd love you to check out.
Keeping our content free and accessible for all families is really important to us. So the Patreon is one way that you can help us keep creating content and doing this for a long time.
Thanks.